If you're not in the arena also getting your ass kicked, I'm not interested in your feedback. Brene Brown. This is Jenny Brezinski from Brzezinski Photography, and you're listening to Miss Jaye, the Renovation.
Alexa, how can I be happier?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, me either.
Episode 3, All Out of Bubblegum. Listen, lady, if your point of reference is your mom looking down her nose at non-Ivy League educations, you and I do not have the same struggles.
Hello there, Champagne Dreamers, and welcome back to another episode of Miss Jaye, the Renovation. I'm so glad you're sticking around with me. This one was supposed to be out a long time ago. I actually started recording a lot of this right around Christmas Eve, but let me tell you, this book has been putting me through it. I have a lot of feelings. I have a lot of things to say. The book, of course, is Jen Sincero's You Are a Badass: How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life. Now, I don't know if I'm already living an awesome life, but I at least got to the end of this book, so it's an improvement over the last episode. Now, to get started, I want to let you hear from a friend of mine. She provided the opening quote for this episode. She's the lovely and talented Jenny Brezinski. Part 1, with a little help from my friends. You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero is the first book in the squad that was actually recommended to me by a friend. So as I mentioned in the introductory episode, there are some of these that I picked out myself. I tried to get a range of perspectives, but I also asked some of the people that are important in my life if there were any books that they recommended or that they thought would be interesting for me to pick up. You Are a Badass was actually recommended to me by my friend Jenny Brezinski. She's a photographer and an actress living in Los Angeles, and there aren't very many people I know who are more badass than she is, so I figured this sounds like a good recommendation. To get started, I called up Jenny and I asked her a few questions about the book and why she recommended it.
The first question I have for you is just, why did you recommend this book to me?
I recommended this book to you because I actually got this book in the mail as a surprise from a very good friend of mine who's basically my mentor, Renee Geerlings. I had told her that I was just going through the normal stuff humans go through and the normal stuff that I go through all the time. And I got this book in the mail and I didn't know who it was from. Started reading it, and it's just one of those things. Sometimes books find you when you need them. That actually happened to me in Miami when I was living there. My best friend, one day at the beach for no reason, handed me this book, The Alchemist, and that book changed my life. And it's funny how sometimes you can hear or get a hold of something you might not be ready to understand or accept or take in. I got You Are a Badass in the mail and I started reading it and I was like, this book was made for me.
And how do you feel about self-help books in general?
That's a good question. For me, self-help books in general, it depends on how they're written. Sometimes you read a book and you know the person is full of shit. You just know. And you kind of have to stop reading the book because you're like, you don't know what you're talking about. I think self-help books, I think any book, whether it's self-help or not, written by people from different times, different eras, different ages, different mindsets. They're all self-help books, whether it's a true history book, an encyclopedia, or You Were a Badass. I think they're cheaper than therapy. I think if you do the work, I think that they can be life-changing.
Have you read the book?
I'm halfway through this book. Like everything in my life, I'm halfway through it, which I think the next book I should read is a book called How to Finish Things You Start. But yeah, I am halfway through this book, and I'm glad that we finally have gotten around to doing this and talking about this, because as I was looking through it today, I had a sense of calm come over me as I reread. I was going through it, rereading, bits and pieces of it that I've already read so I could refresh myself. And I got this really weird calm that came over me as far as all the other things in life I feel like I've got to do and I'm burdened with and getting things done. And it was funny that, because I haven't opened a book in a minute, and I have a list and actually have books out, like a stack of books that I want to read because I know that they're going to help me. And reading just the little pieces from this today inspired me again to go, okay, you know what? I'm going to sit down and finish this book. And it was nice. It was nice the way it made me feel and made me realize and remember that when you feed yourself the knowledge and the information, that it can help you.
What is it that you hope that I get out of this book?
One of my favorite parts about, or the things about this book, is the fact that each section has steps. And every single last step, or each section, is to love yourself. I think everyone on the planet has a problem with that. It doesn't matter what they say. It's the way this planet's running and working right now. I just think everyone's missing that self-love. I don't know if we stopped teaching it. I love the way that this book literally just wants you to love yourself. And the little things it says, the quotes at the beginning of each chapter, there's just so much good stuff in here. So I guess at the end of it, I just hope that you love yourself more and that you realize that you are great and that you can do anything.
Aw, thank you. So as you can see, Jenny is all about raising your frequency and living your best life. So I was excited to get into this book and find out what it might have to offer me. The first section, however, had me thinking that maybe it had something to offer me that I wasn't even looking for. Part 2: The Secret for Dummies. So I'm finishing up the first section of this book, and I can't help feeling a little bit like maybe I've been bamboozled. I think that this book was already released. I think that it was already put out. It already had its Oprah moment, and it was called The Secret. From the very beginning, she's talking about manifesting. You have to manifest your life. You have to manifest your destiny. The first section is all about believing in God or some sort of higher power, which is already something that is a little bit of a turnoff in terms of, impressing a certain kind of spirituality. I mean, I think she does it in a way that's pretty open, referring to things as source energy or the universe, but there's definitely something here that is a little bit icky for me. She has one quote in here: "The universe will match whatever vibration you put out, and you can't fool the universe." And that's something that I've always disliked about The Secret. This idea that somehow if you're not successful, if you haven't achieved all of your dreams, it's somehow because you haven't put out the right vibration. It doesn't really account for any sort of other circumstances or any other things that can happen, and that's just not reality. I think that there's things that we can change. I think that there's stories we tell about ourselves that are negative and that could be rewritten, but to completely discount any sense that there's anything out there that impacts your life except for the vibrations that you put out is naive at best, and I think harmful at worst. She says, in order to truly raise your vibration, you've got to believe that everything you want is available to you. And the best way to keep this belief strong is by staying connected to source energy. So again, if you just believe it, and she tells this anecdote about how she doesn't even worry. Every time she goes to the mall or she goes somewhere, she knows she's going to get a parking spot. And every time she goes, she always gets amazing parking. First of all, that's not an example that really convinces me of a lot, that you get really good parking spaces when you go everywhere. But she talks about it as if it's every single time, and I have a hard time believing that she never gets a bad parking spot. It's just too slick. It's a little too calculated, and I just don't know that I believe it. I just don't know that I buy it. There's something insincero about this. Now, one thing that she did say that kind of resonated for me is she talks about this idea of the big snooze. So the big snooze is when you're not living the life that you want to live. You're not taking the chances that you should take to get the life that you want to live. She says the big snooze will do everything it can to stop you from changing and growing, especially since you're attempting to obliterate the very identity that you and everyone else has come to know as you. And I think that that's something that anytime you're going to make a big change or you're going to try something drastic, there's so many people, they're so used to seeing you a certain way. And so then they get very nervous and they start to think that you won't be the person that you were for them, that you were comfortable. They were comfortable knowing you that way. And that's true. You are creating a new sense of self and a new way of being. And I think that that's tough for ourselves. I think we have those kind of discussions with ourselves because even if we're not thriving, we're comfortable or we're familiar with where we're at. And so even though it might suck a little bit, we think, well, what if it sucks worse? And so it can be hard to break out of that. That inertia can be really kind of strangling. And she ends the section talking about self-perception and how important self-perception is if you're going to make lasting change in your life. And she says, it's just as easy to believe we're awesome as it is to believe we're giant sucking things. It takes the same amount of energy, the same amount of focus. So why do we choose all the drama? And there's part of me that really wants to get on board with that. There's part of me that really wants to believe that that sort of change is possible. But her answer is just this sort of, well, everybody should quit their job and become a consultant and just decide they're going to live the life that they want. And if they really believed it, it would happen anyway. So why are we scared? And I just thought that's so unrealistic. The truth of the matter is that not everybody can just run off and be a consultant, or we would all be consultants and there would be nobody to be a consultee. Or else we would just consult each other all day long. I mean, the hard truth of this world is that, the toilet's still got to get scrubbed. The burgers still have to be made. Somebody's got to ring up our gas at the gas station. And I have a hard time believing, and certainly there could be people that's what they dream of, because maybe that job gives them the free time and it gives them enough money to live simply in the way that they want to live, and it bankrolls the things that they really believe in and really love. But nobody's manifesting being a cashier at your local burger joint, and nobody's manifesting being a housekeeper or a hooker or any of those things. And so is it just that they don't believe enough in their dream? I don't know. I just struggle with it. It's a nice idea, but I have trouble getting on board. But I mean, she's selling a good story here. The last sentence or two of this section is, we are all perfect in our own magnificent fucked up ways. Laugh at yourself, love yourself and others, rejoice in the cosmic ridiculousness. And I want to get on board, but I'm really struggling with this. It just sounds like The Secret, and there's something about that has always rubbed me the wrong way. Part 3, I'm just not that into you. All right, well, I've moved into section 2, and the struggle continues. So section 2 is all about how to embrace your inner badass, and it's all about self-love and self-acceptance, and there's all the typical kind of self-helpy stuff. And she says, when we're happy and all in love with ourselves, we can't be bothered with the bullshit, our own or other people's. And appreciate how special you are, and drown yourself in affirmations, and do the things you love. Ditch the self-deprecating humor. And I get it, it makes some sense, and it makes sense to be nicer to ourselves and be kinder to ourselves. And she talks about not comparing yourselves to others. And I think that that's really important. I think that there's a lot of competition in things that aren't a competition. We always compare ourselves to other people. And if we aren't where they're at, or haven't achieved the things that they've achieved, or don't have the things that they have, that we're somehow lacking, even if that's not anything we ever thought we wanted to begin with. But it's just so much more difficult than just saying nice things to yourself and just taping an affirmation to your mirror about how wonderful you are and how everything is available to you. There's so much of this that just reeks of confirmation bias and survivor bias. The idea that because she quit her job and decided to live this life as a freelance consultant, that everybody can do that. It's the story that people tell of, well, we don't have to worry about racism anymore because we had a black president. Well, yeah, we had one black president. And look at all the racism that erupted during his presidency. And look at all the racism that's erupted after his presidency. And so just because one person was able to overcome a certain situation doesn't make that situation any less real. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't impact and hold back and affect other people. I mean, there's something about this that just has a real naivete. You know, at one point she talks about how her mother would look down her nose at non-Ivy League educations. And it's like, if that's where you're coming from, if that's the level of privilege that you're at, where that's even a possibility, then you have different kinds of struggles than a lot of people who might be reading your books. For some people, even the idea of an Ivy League education is so far outside of what's possible for them, or pursuing it would involve, a mounting tremendous debt. Do they even belong to a school system that would get them prepared to succeed in an environment like that? It's just this confirmation bias, this survivor bias that says, oh, well, I did it, so everybody else can do it too. And it's not that there aren't good things in here. She talks about forgiving yourself and that's really important. And I think that that's something that I certainly resonate with. I will go over and over mistakes that I've made in my head over and over again. And so I think that there is a place for some self-love and some self-care. But again, I can't get over how sort of naive to the real world this seems to be. I mean, if anything was going to pull me in to her book, it was going to be a Dolly Parton quote, because I love me some Dolly Parton. And this is a great one. I've heard this before. I'm not offended by all the dumb blonde jokes because I know I'm not dumb. I also know I'm not blonde. And that's something that really, it makes me laugh. And I think that it also speaks to some of the good parts of this book, is really kind of knowing yourself. I think that there's pieces of this book that are going to be useful to me, but I just am not that into it. I just am not, it's like that episode of Sex and the City of he's just not that into you. I feel like I'm about to ghost on this book. I feel like I'm probably going to break up with them over an awkward email in about a week. And some of the bits of advice in here, all that matters is what's true for you. And if you can stay connected to that without straying, you will be a mighty superhero. And again, that there are things outside of your control. And I know that can sound like victim speak, and that can sound like the stories we tell ourselves where we do talk ourselves out of things that maybe we could do. But it's just this idea that somehow if you just believe enough, you can achieve anything. And that's not always true. I mean, there are forces outside of us. I could absolutely believe to the core of my being that if I stepped off a cliff, I'm going to walk out into the air and be unscathed. But the truth is that there's gravity in this world. The truth is that there are things outside of my control that are going to impact me. Another thing that I think is really useful from here is she talks a lot about having mentors, finding people to be your mentors or your guides. And I think that that's important on a spiritual level, on a professional level, in our personal relationships, in our love relationships. That I absolutely am on board with, this idea of having mentors and having people who support you. I think that that's what self-help books are for some people. And I think that that's something that I've kind of come to realize. At the end of the day, any changes you're going to make, you have to make for yourself. Myself included, I think we often put too much emphasis on the books themselves, that somehow the books are the change. I mean, I don't know if I thought that I was going to buy these 14 books and put them in a pile in my office and suddenly my life would be better. And it's not about the books. It's not about even what the people in the books are saying. It's about how I take what's in these books and use it or don't use it, or apply it or don't apply it, and how I just decide I want to live in the world going forward. And so while I'm not 100% connected with this, I think that there's maybe something I'm coming around to. The idea of these mentors and using these books for what's useful. Whatever resonates for you, take that and use that. Because if something doesn't make sense to you, if something doesn't resonate for you, it's not going to be useful. And so making sure that you take the pieces that are of use to you and using them to make whatever positive change you can, that's what's going to be most important. That's what's going to actually be useful. Part 4, Starting to Drink the Kool-Aid. So part 3 of this book is all about how to tap into the mother lode. And the first thing that it starts off with is talking about meditation and thinking about synchronicity and coincidence and, whatever you believe about coincidence and what that means when things pop up over and over again in your life, is that recently I have gotten so many references to meditation. So many people have mentioned meditation. It's come up multiple times. My first weekend here in Arizona, I went out to check out some of the metaphysical stores, and I went and saw a psychic medium just to get some advice, try to get some clarity, see what was going on. I hadn't really done a reading with somebody that I didn't sort of know, and so he mentioned meditation. And, somebody at work had mentioned that they read an article about meditation and how important it was and how it can benefit other sort of Western medical practices. And I think that that's something that I'm missing. I think that I'm missing a meditation practice, a practice of really going inward and looking at my thoughts. One thing that she said that kind of made me laugh and also made me think a little bit is when you shut up and meditate for even 5 minutes and start to really notice the thoughts that are swirling around in your brain, it's rather illuminating. If you're like most people, the majority of your thoughts are about as valuable and interesting as a bunch of 2-year-olds fighting over a sippy cup. And that's something that I've been thinking about more often, is what I spend my time thinking about. It's interesting to me how much time I spend on negative thoughts and on creating negative stories about myself, and how useful it would be to sort of sit down and focus on those and really think about, how do I change the story? How do I change that pattern of thought that tells me that I can't do things? What could happen if I change the story to thinking about the things that I can do, thinking about the things that are possible? She's got a section in here called Lead With Your Crotch, and it talks about this band that she started called Crotch. And it makes me think a lot about really my entire career in drag and my really getting involved with drag. And the way that I approach the world when I'm in my drag persona is very different. I mean, I do some of this out of drag as well, but especially I sort of look at a situation and I give it a quick once over, and I've sort of lived by this idea that bad decisions make good stories. And so I look at a situation and I think, what's the likelihood that this is going to end in my death? And if it seems pretty low, I'm probably going to go ahead and go with it. Because even if something doesn't work out the way that I think it's going to, it's probably going to give me an interesting story. And I do have some pretty weird, interesting stories from things that I've done just because I thought, you know what, why not? One of the quotes she has in here is, "There's nothing as unstoppable as a freight train full of fuck yeah." And when I think about some of the things that I do now, like Days of the Dead, that's something that I wouldn't have tried under normal circumstances. I was kind of even going outside of my comfort zone to go to the Dark Shadows Festival. And then when I had to cancel that trip and found Days of the Dead instead and decided to go and do the whole trip in drag and do it as a sort of vacation / performance piece / work trip, gathering content for my website, it kind of took on this whole other life. And now some of the people that I've met, I mean, Jenny Brezinski, who opened up this episode, is somebody that I met through Days of the Dead. And so I have all this evidence that when you really just give in and trust what the universe has, that it can be good. And yet I still have that negative ideation of, well, things aren't going to work out. Oh, this is going to be a disaster. And I don't know how to reprogram that. Oh, and of course, I should have known there's a whole chapter on forgiveness, because that is and always will be my struggle. I am a good old Capricorn, and I can hold a grudge until I'm cold and dead in the ground. And this is another one of those messages that I keep getting over and over again, that it doesn't make sense to hold on to that. And there's kind of a funny quote from Lily Tomlin, who I love. Again, every once in a while, she'll pepper in these quotes from people that I absolutely love. So even if I feel like I'm losing the connection with the book a little bit, she'll bring me back in with a Dolly Parton, or in this case, a Lily Tomlin. And the quote is, "Forgiveness means giving up all hope for a better past." And I think that that's so poignant for me. This idea of if I just hold on to this resentment and this anger and refuse that forgiveness, that somehow the past will become better, or somebody can, go back and make the past not have happened. That's not how it works. And all I'm doing is affecting my own future and affecting my own ability to move forward. And that, this message that's in here is a message that I've gotten over and over again, and I just do my damnedest to ignore, is forgiveness isn't about being nice to them. It's about being nice to yourself. The people that I'm mad at and the people that I have that resentment towards, they don't give a shit. And maybe they do. I don't know their lives because most of them are not in my life anymore. But they don't know that I'm sitting here stewing on it or thinking about it, or that that's still part of my programming. It doesn't impact their daily life, certainly. Not in the way that it impacts mine. There's another quote in here: holding on to resentment is like taking poison and waiting for your enemies to die. That somehow you can sort of punish them. But I think that that's part of that sort of screwed up messaging, is you're like in some way thinking that you can punish them. And of course you're not punishing them. You can always hold out hope that maybe they're sad because you're not in their life anymore or whatever. But the reality is you're just taking poison to try to make them die. And the person that it's hurting is you. Oh, as much as I hate to admit it, I think I've got some work to do on forgiveness, and I know that that's the book in the squad that I'm really dreading the most. I put that towards the end because I just don't know how I'm feeling about it, but I keep getting this message over and over again, is that it's time to look at these things that need to just be forgiven and put in the past. And the last thing in the book, again, Jenny had brought up in her interview that the last step in each of these chapters is to love yourself. And here it says, love yourself and life becomes a party. And those are the times where I feel like I've really been at the party, is when I love myself. I don't know, against my will, Jen Sincero might be winning me over a little bit. There might be something to this. Part 5, Little Critter, Big Lesson. All right, so it's Christmas Day, and this year, instead of spending Christmas at home with my family, I am at a Homewood Suites in Chandler, Arizona, and I'm here on a work trip. And so I started out the day down at the pool area. It's about 55, 60 degrees, which may seem cool to some people, but if you're coming from North Dakota, 60 degrees is balmy and delightful, and the pool is heated. And so I thought, I love swimming. I'm going to go down and do some swimming and sit in the hot tub. I'm going to relax and do some reading for this project. And so the book that I'm working on now, obviously, the episode you're listening to, You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero. And I was down reading it, and I got to the end of the third section, and there was a lot of it that resonated with me. There's a lot of it that really sort of mirrors what my spiritual beliefs already are. And so as much as I was trying to be snarky and argue with it in some ways, there was a lot of it that really resonated. But there was also a lot that I was having trouble with. There was a lot that I was sort of arguing with. And I talked about that earlier in the episode, and I'm still not sure that I'm won over. But as the universe or creator or source or God or whatever you want to call it tends to do, I got a little bit of a lesson, and it seems like the kind of story that is going to sound made up, but it's one of those synchronicities or coincidences or whatever that really just sort of made me have to sit back and think a little bit. And so I was gathering up my stuff, and I thought, I'll come upstairs and I'll make some leftover Chinese food for lunch and get ready. I think I'm going to go to a movie tonight. And I was standing there, I thought, you know what? And the phrasing of this is very strange to me, but I remember specifically what I thought is, I thought, I'm not done with this pool yet. So I didn't think I want to keep swimming, or maybe I'll swim a little bit longer. I thought, I'm not done with this pool yet. And so I decided to get back into the pool, and I swam around and floated a little bit, and I was going over to the ladder to get out, and I noticed that there was a bee in the water. And there's not anything very strange or unusual about that. Obviously, insects and things fall into the pool all the time and drown, and they kind of float around until they get caught up in the filters, and leaves and all kinds of debris, things like that. But I noticed that this bee was still alive and was trying to flap its wings and was trying to free itself from the water. It was very clearly stuck. And I just looked at it and I thought, I can't let this bee drown. I don't know what it was that I just all of a sudden had this connection with this bee. And I thought, I can't
let this bee drown. And I didn't want to just grab it with my hand because I thought that seems like maybe a recipe for getting stung. And so I went to the edge of the pool and I found a leaf. There was just this kind of dried up leaf. And so I grabbed the leaf and I brought it over, and it took a little bit to do, but I finally managed to snag the bee onto the leaf. Then once I got him on the leaf, and he just kind of sat in one place, and then I brought him over to the edge of the pool and I set the leaf down, and then I just sort of watched him. And I just kind of watched this little bee, and for a long time I wasn't sure if maybe the chemicals in the pool water had made him sick. I thought, what if I did this and it doesn't matter? What if he's gonna die anyway? And I just sort of watched him, and he's sort of rubbing his feet against each other and rubbing his feet on his big abdomen. And I think he was rubbing all of the moisture off so that he could fly. I don't know why I'm assuming that this bee is a man. Isn't it the male bees, the worker bees that go out of the hive? I don't fucking know. I don't know about bees. I'm not a beeologist or whatever, but I'm just watching him really closely, and I felt like I was getting into what Jen Sincero describes as flow, where I was just really present in the moment, and I was really paying attention to what was going on. And I'm getting really close, and I'm watching him, and I'm looking at the little hairs on his body and his little antenna, and he kind of moves his wings around. And at first he seemed like maybe he was kind of limping around a little bit, and I was really concerned about what was going to happen. And so I got really close to the edge of the pool, and he was standing right near the edge. And even that I thought was strange. I thought, he's just fallen into this pool and he almost drowned and he made it out, and now he's coming right to the edge. And so I got really close. I could look really close at him, and he's just doing his thing. He's just moving his legs, rubbing them against each other, rubbing them against his abdomen, stretching his wings out, fluttering them a little bit. And then I wanted to get a closer look at his abdomen, so I sort of moved down the pool so that I was behind him. I kind of floated down a little bit. Obviously, not very far. He's only a bee. He's not that big. But I moved to the other side, and the bee sort of turned to follow me so that he was still facing me. And I was like, well, that's weird. Maybe that's just his instinct or whatever. Maybe he's checking wind currents or something. And so I moved back, and he moved back. And then he just kept doing his thing. He just sort of kept moving his wings and moving his legs. And I waited about a minute or so, and I did it again. And I went around to the other side, and he turned to follow me. And I went to the other side, and he turned to follow me again. And again, I don't know shit about bees, but I know that they do dances. They communicate through dancing. And I thought, what if this is some sort of dance that he's doing? And I know that this is going to sound hokey and like I'm turning into some sort of white hippie witch or something, but I thought, what if this is just some sort of celebration dance that in whatever bee processing way, he sort of recognized that the end was almost near and he escaped it. The way that people will have a close call and suddenly they appreciate life more and they start to live differently and all that sort of thing. And then it just brought me back to this idea that the universe will provide. And I thought this was such a beautiful message and such a beautiful moment as I'm watching this little bee clean himself or dance or whatever he's doing. And I started to think about how vast that is, because it's very easy to get wrapped up in ourselves and think about the fact that, oh, the universe brought this bee to me to tell me that, the universe really is filled with abundance and blah, 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 and all this kind of shit, which is all about me. But then I also thought, maybe this isn't the universe providing me with anything. Maybe this is the universe providing for that bee. I told you, white hippie witch. But it was such a beautiful thought for that moment. I thought, what if this is not about me at all? What if this is not ever really about me? What if it's about this bee? What if this bee truly believed that he was going to get out of the water? He really believed. Oh my God. As I'm saying it, I'm like, you should get out your granola and put on some Birkenstocks and go live in a commune because you sound crazy. But the universe provides things that we need, and to think that we're the only critters that benefit from that, I think is so self-indulgent. And so I don't think the bee is having this whole interior dialogue about the giant sea monster that saved him from drowning or anything. But what if that's just the universe's way of providing? In that moment, that's what it was about, and that was the lesson. And it was the lesson for the bee, maybe, but it was definitely the lesson for me. And now I sound like a fucking Dr. Seuss book.
Part 6. It all comes crashing down.
So I finally thought I was getting on board with this book, and I had my little life-changing experience with the bee at the pool and whatever. And then I get into section 4, and now all that stuff that I felt at the beginning, where it was all that secret-y bullshit, where it just kind of blames you for what's happening in your life. Part 4, which is how to get over your BS already, is exactly that. The very first chapter starts in on how you are to blame for the situation that you're in. She tells this stupid story about how a bird gets into her house and she's trying to chase it out and it just keeps running into the window. And if it would just stop for a moment and breathe and pay attention and see that there's a door right over here, and then it would stop slamming into the window. And she says, it made me think of the way so many of us are living our lives. And then on the next page, she says, if you choose to get over all your reasons why the money you so desire is evil, or your identity as someone who's scared of intimacy, or your attachment to a plethora of other excuses that you perceive to be very serious and real, when they're really probably kind of cute and ridiculous, I want to punch this bitch in the face. This is why things like The Secret are detrimental. This is why self-help, to me, is a joke. And then she just continues to go on and become aware of what your stories are. So this book has given no concrete solutions. It just gives you these sort of privileged, entitled white girl notions of what it means to just go out and live the life you want. Go live your best life. That somehow, if you're single, it's because you want to be single, or you've told yourself a story where you're always single. And if you would just, look around. And so she says, Sad Sack Jane, the lawyer, says she should keep her miserable job at the prestigious firm because she'll never find one that she likes that pays as well. Really? Is that why nobody on earth anywhere is doing a job that they love and making even more money than you make, Jane? Lonely-hearted Sally always says she can't find a good single man because there aren't any left out there. Really, Sally? All the good single men were hunted down and killed, so no matter how many dates you go on, or how many times you put on sexy high heels and hang around at Home Depot, you'll never bump into one? Was the awesome guy your friend Deb just met the lone survivor of a good guy genocide? Broke-ass Joe, the personal trainer, always talks about how he can't make any money and how there are no high-paying clients out there. Really, Joe? Not any? Anywhere? Then how is it that other personal trainers have more high-paying clients than they can handle, and that some even created energy drinks and workout products with their pictures on them and are raking it in on QVC? I understand that it's very easy to talk ourselves into a place where we don't take advantage of opportunities. But to tell people that there's this infinite world out there, I mean, that's survivor bias. That's people who have just, made drastic choices and it worked out for them. And they're the people who write books and they're the people who you listen to. But how many people quit their job to try some crazy scheme and it didn't work out for them? It doesn't always work out. You're not giving any sort of practical advice. You're not giving anything that's useful. You're just telling people that if you're not in the place that you want to be, if things are not the best life you could possibly have, that it's your fault because you chose whatever situation you're in. And it makes me angry. It makes me so ragey. Because again, it's clear that she comes from some sort of privilege. And yes, we could make better choices. And yes, we could do these things. But to act like you are to blame for the things that you go through in your life is so patently offensive. And I can't believe, but that's these hucksters. I mean, I started to go along with this, By the end of section 3, I was like, yeah, this is a thing. And then I see a bee in a pool and I save it. And I got to tell myself that story that I was the white knight for this little creature. And I do still believe in higher powers, and I believe that there are energies that we tap into, and I believe we can always do things to improve ourselves. But what this book doesn't address is that there are going to be a lot of bees that go into that pool that I'm not there swimming, and I'm not there to scoop them out. So that's one version of the story, where somebody comes along and grabs a leaf and scoops you out of the pool when you're drowning. And then there are going to be those other stories where you just fucking drowned. And I don't feel like if you are the one that drowns, that you should be blamed for that. And I don't know why I'm getting this upset about a stupid self-help book. But it's hard. When for years, you've had people tell you that you are the problem, and you work to make yourself better. And you do everything that you can think of to give yourself the life that you want, and when it's not perfect, this person comes along to tell you that she can help you, and then her version of helping you is to tell you that you are still the problem. Sometimes we are our own problems, and sometimes we make bad choices, and sometimes we do it because we just can't see or imagine any other options. I get that, but when people are making a real concerted effort to change and to make things different, it's so hurtful to then come in and say, well, if it didn't work out, that's still your fault. Because there's limitless opportunity. So it's not that the right opportunities or the right connections or the right situation wasn't there. It's because you didn't really believe in it. You didn't really put yourself out there. You told yourself a story that defeated you. But then all that does is now this book makes me feel defeated. This book makes me feel like there's nothing out there that could be affecting my life except for me, because I didn't want it bad enough. That I feel the way that I feel, and I struggle with the things that I struggle with because I didn't want it bad enough. I didn't want a relationship that was fulfilling, and I didn't want a marriage that was built on truth bad enough. That doesn't teach resiliency. That doesn't help you survive. And her language is so belittling. You know, she tells a story about Ray Charles. He was a broke, blind minority who was orphaned by the age of 15 and raised in the colored part of town in a time when slavery wasn't all that distant of a memory. And he went on to become one of the most influential and successful American musicians of all time. Basically, he wasted no time on excuses. And this next part is so demeaning. Any little woe is me-ism that I try to hold up against Ray instantly wilts into the sniveling little nice try that it is, and I'm forced to look upon my life and my excuses with a new perspective. Really? You're really going to let that stop you? And I get that we need to be more resilient and we need to push ourselves. To have this idea that you can just create that sort of experience for every single person on the planet is just not realistic. It misunderstands our very society. And just the way that she talks about people who struggle is so demeaning. And if I hadn't already quit on my last book and felt bad about that, I probably would quit on this stupid book too. But I don't know. We'll keep going and see if there's anything else we can get out of it. But she lost me here. She really did.
Part 7. Mo money, mo problems. After section 4, it took me a long time to come back to this episode. I really was feeling defeated by that book, and I was so close to giving up on it. I thought pretty soon I'm going to have to rename this series the 3/4 Book Club, because I thought I wasn't going to get through any of the damn books. But I powered through and I finished the book, and it took me a long time to come back to this and figure out how I wanted to talk about it and how I wanted to engage with it. Because at the end of the day, I think that there are some good things here. I think that there are pieces of this book that are useful. Even in that section that I was having trouble with, I think there are things there that are useful. And I think that's why I got so emotional. I think that that's why that triggered that strong of an emotional response for me. I 100% don't completely agree with her. And I think that some of the ways that she talks about things are really detrimental to people. So as much as she's trying to help people, I think that they can be very detrimental. And once I got sort of shaken out of my Kool-Aid haze of really being on board with this, I think that I started to see more of the inconsistencies in the book. You know, on one page, she's talking about how every single time she drives anywhere, she manifests a parking spot for herself. And she says, the universe is limitless. There's all of this opportunity. All you have to do is believe. It's immediately available to you. But then on the next page, she'll say something about about, well, you have to stick with it because you don't know how long it'll take for you to actually manifest it. Well, is it immediately available, or is it something that you have to wait for and keep working? Because that's another way that The Secret and those kinds of books sort of hedge their bets, is they either blame you for not actually manifesting it because you didn't want it, or if you really are showing that you believe it and you trust and you 100% believe that you can manifest your reality, it just hasn't come together yet. It's still coming. You just don't know the timing. So you can never give up hope. You have to stick with it all the time. Nothing is really a setback. It's just another step on the predetermined process that you're going to get there. And it's such bullshit. It's such bullshit. It's such a money-making scheme. I mean, it really is a way to sell this sort of idea that you can have everything you want all the time. And if you don't, it's either because you didn't really believe it, or you actually believe the opposite and you manifested something bad, or if you're trying, it's just not the right time. So it's coming. Just because you haven't seen the evidence yet doesn't mean that it's not coming. And it doesn't mean that I'm selling you a crock of shit. It just means that it hasn't happened yet. Well, isn't that convenient for the gurus, right? They don't know the timing. They know it'll happen because if you really believe it will happen, they just can't tell you the timing. Well, what if the timing is fucking 10 minutes after you're dead? I mean, that's not helpful to anyone. And I think that sort of, well, it's working whether you see it or not, and combined with if something goes wrong, it's your fault because you manifested the opposite or you didn't believe enough in what you were trying to manifest, it just becomes this sort of money-making machine. And so I think that as much as I'm sort of snarky and skeptical about self-help books, I think there's also a way that you have to be a little bit skeptical. You have to go in and say, there are going to be things that are useful to me, but if I try to just buy it all, hook, line, and sinker, that's where I'm going to run into problems, because you run into those inconsistencies. You run into those sort of logical traps where one second everything is immediately available, and then the next second, if it hasn't happened, it's just because you don't know the timing yet. Well, I don't really get it. And I think that there's a lot of focus in this book on money. And I think that that is something that really kind of turned me off a little bit, because yes, part of what I want to do with my sort of personal transformation growth that I'm on right now is I want to make better choices about money, and I want to start to build myself a little bit more financial stability than I've had in the past, because I recognize that I am 100% an emotional eater and an emotional shopper, and that's why I'm always fat and broke. And so I want financial stability, but that's such a little part of what I'm going for, that this book speaks so much about believing that money isn't evil and that you can have the money you want and the money you desire, and that it's not evil or selfish to want that. And that might all be true, but that's not what I'm looking for. That's not the kind of badass that I'm trying to be. Financial stability is maybe part of it, but it's not the crux of it. I'm much more interested in the emotional change. And I think that that's part of why that last section was so difficult, is because in some ways what she's talking about in creating a sort of financial life for yourself, and I'm talking about, struggling with actual depression and things like that. And so her way of talking about things, it just didn't line up, because it just felt so arrogant and it felt so demeaning, but it wasn't about that. It wasn't about the money. That's not what this whole thing has been about for me. And so her advice, the advice that she does give, is so based on just manifesting more money and making more financial opportunities for yourself. There's more problems than just money out there. That's not the only thing that somebody might be looking for. And I think that there's certainly an audience for this. I think that there is a certain type of person who maybe is not dealing with the same kinds of emotional issues and is looking for help sort of integrating a better financial stability into their larger worldview or their spiritual life or whatever it is. And I get that a lot of times the assumed audience for self-help books is women, whether that's fair or not. And statistically, women make less money than men. And studies have shown that women are less likely to negotiate for higher salaries because of all of these bullshit gender expectations that we put on them about thinking about the greater good of the company rather than themselves. And there's all these different things. I get it. I have a master's degree focused on gender studies. I get it. Like, I understand all of these pieces. It would be one thing if if she were just saying, you are a badass. Here's my guide to financial freedom and living a life of wealth and abundance. But that's not what she's saying. She's saying, you are a badass. How to stop doubting your greatness and start living an awesome life. But she's defining awesome life completely in financial money terms. And at the end of the day, that's not what I'm most interested in. Maybe that's what I should be most interested in. I think Mama Champagne would say maybe you should be most interested in that, but that's just not as much what I'm interested in. It was a roller coaster ride. I guess I'm glad that I actually finished this book. And I think that there are some useful things. And maybe as I continue to go through the squad and I continue to compare all of these different books, maybe the pieces will make more sense. And maybe I can take the things that are useful from this book and from the last book and combine them in with new things that I'm finding to help find something that's going to continue to push me forward and push me into growing and evolving and changing into the best version of myself that I can be. Part 8. Ready to kick ass and chew bubblegum. Maybe?
It's funny, I've already read this half of this book. And this quote didn't stick out to me, but when I was going through it today, there's one that says, "You are never alone or helpless. The force that guides the stars guides you too." I needed that. Because I feel so insignificant sometimes. Trying to please everyone so much, and with my awkward nerdiness that I have. So I don't know why this quote is going to help me so much, but it makes me feel big. So I'm glad that we did that today. Just wanted to share that with you.
As a way of wrapping things up, I wanted to include that little piece of audio from my phone call with Jenny Brezinski, because I think that it really sort of epitomizes the spirit of what I want to bring to this project. And I think that as we were talking about how self-help books might fit into our lives, I was really struck by the fact that so many people come to self-help books and they look for mentors and gurus and guides, and they're coming to it with this real sense of hope. And I think that that's part of why I had such a difficult time with this, is that I really sort of surrendered and gave into that desire to find hope in this book. And while I think that's great, I think that it's important to remember that you are the hope that you need. If you can find books and guides and things that help you on your journey, that's wonderful. But you should never let those things supersede the hope that you have within yourself. Because if it becomes more about the book or the guide or the guru, that's where you can start to feel bad if you don't live up to exactly what they're saying, or you allow them to affect your own vision of yourself. And some people are more cognizant of that. Some people are more responsible in how they treat the hope that other people place in them. And so if you ever find a book or a guru or a guide or a mentor or whatever that is causing you to lose hope rather than retain it or gain it, if you find something that's making you feel bad instead of making you feel better, then that probably isn't the right tool for the job that you have at that moment. You are big, you are wonderful, you are amazing, and you are enough. Part 9. A picture is worth 1,000 words. This episode's Brené Brown quote was read by Jenny Brezinski. She is one of the people that I've met through the Days of the Dead horror conventions. I first ran into her in Indianapolis in 2016. We reconnected in Atlanta in 2017, and we were crying on rooftops in Charlotte, North Carolina in 2018. She's an actress and photographer and has been seen in films like Jelly, All Out Dysfunction, and From Jennifer. And you can see more of her photography work at brzezinskiphotography.com. You can also follow her social media, Brzezinski Photography, to see some of her work as well as pictures of her small herd of adorable fur babies. She recently married actor and professional outstanding human being Derek Mears and is working on living her best life in the sunny state of California.
Miss Jaye, The Renovation is a 17-episode limited series podcast presented by Champagne Dreams Productions. While we're all here to have fun, mental health is a serious issue. Nothing in this podcast series should be taken as medical advice, and listening to podcasts or reading self-help books is not a substitute for proper mental health care. If you or someone you know is considering suicide, please contact the Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-8255 or visit suicidepreventionhotline.org for more information. I love all of my Champagne Dreamers out there. Stay safe and stay alive.
This episode of Miss Jaye the Renovation includes royalty-free music from bensound.com. The tracks featured in this episode in the order that they appeared are Clear Day, Enigmatic, Happiness, Tenderness, November, Sad Day, and Summer. For these and more great royalty-free tracks, visit bensound, that's BEN sound.com. Miss Jaye the Renovation is written and directed by Chris M. Stoner and is a Champagne Dreams production.